the more that you take care of people, the longer they want to do business with you, right? And that's the name of the game, right? Is you want to make business fun. Like, you can't just look at numbers every month and just make off the fly decisions. You'll just run yourself and you burn yourself out, right? Like, you just got to have fun.
What's going on, everyone? Just finished on my interview with Matt Powell. He's in fractional CFO. This week's topic is going to be all about finances. And I know that could be a dry subject, but rest assured, as a business owner, this is the one thing you really, really can never ignore is cash flow, how to pay employees, how to take an owner draw, what's your tax liability. This is essential to running any type of service-based business. We speak about how to set it up, how to pay yourself first, called profit first. Really how to structure your entire business on a quarterly basis, difference between an LLC and an S Corp. Again, I know this can be boring, but rest assured, as business owners, this is an episode you don't want to miss out on. So stay tuned. Without further ado, Mr. Matt Powell. All right, what is going on, my classy listeners here? I'm with a great guy that I had the privilege of meeting in Austin, Texas. His name is Matt Powell with the Powell Finance Group. Him and I bonded because we jointly went to this M3 meetup of other entrepreneurs at a great networking event. We got to meet this gentleman by the name of Drayton McLean, a billionaire. He was the vice chairman of Walmart. He has his own logistic company, and he was the previous owner of the Houston Astros. So it was really great to kind of get to know Matt in between all of these networking events, learn a little bit more about his services. I fell in love with the guy, honestly. He's got such a genuine personality. He's a team player, high energy, and this episode is going to be really focused on what his CFO services is, what a CFO actually is, a fractional CFO that matters, and why any good business owner should really pay attention to their cash flow and their bookkeeping. But before we go into all that good stuff, I want to introduce Matt. Matt, great to have you on the show, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
Dude, it's a complete honor for me to meet you and connect with you so well, and to be here and share a little bit about my story, and hopefully get to help a couple people along the way.
Yeah, you've got a really unique background. I can't wait to kind of scratch the surface here. So let's start a little bit in early days of Matt, the baseball prodigy that you are. You were a great baseball player at the time. Were you D1 athlete and going semi-pro? Is that right?
That was the trajectory. I grew up in a super small town where, like, my graduating class was 68 people, and they were crazy enough to give me the valedictorian. So I was, all through my high school career, I really enjoyed playing sports. I was kind of groomed into it. None of my parents ever played, but I just turned out to be this super competitive guy. But I liked doing it with other people. So team sports was like the best way to do it. I really fell in love with. I took hold of football and baseball. So in high school, they gave me. I was the only kid that could really throw the ball, so I was a quarterback. And then for baseball, I got to pitch and play some of the field. But yeah, I was projected to be a D1 athlete, and then my senior year, second day of my senior year, I actually got into a car accident. So that kind of threw me off course a little bit.
So when you got into that car accident, was this like a career-ending car accident when it comes to baseball or any athletics at the time?
It should have been, to be honest with you. It was a pretty brutal accident, and it really like handicapped me. I lost a couple of limbs on my foot, and so like it should have been, right. Like that happened in August of 2013. So going into my senior year, I didn't get to play football. I missed out completely on that. And by January, the doctor said, "Hey, look, Matt, let's start putting some pressure into like starting your rehab step." And so as soon as he told me that, we went back to my house because my doctor's appointments were an hour and a half away in Savannah, Georgia. So then we would drive back all the way back home. And when I got that news, I got back home, I took the wheelchair and I just threw it down the ramp. Like literally just got up and said, okay, if I can put pressure on it, then I'm going to start walking. That was like the one question that always bothered me was like, Matt, are you going to be able to walk the same? Is you going to be the same? Are you going to feel the same? Are you going to be able to run again? Although I had all these D1 offers on the table, no one responded to me anymore, right? So I felt completely isolated. So it was me and what I wanted to do with it from there, right? And as soon as I got the clearance, I threw the wheelchair, started putting pressure on it. And I really put my mindset to, okay, I wanted to be a collegiate athlete. That's what I'm gonna aim for. So all the offers got wiped off the table, and it felt like starting over from scratch. And what I did was I battled through it, and I had one game where I hit a couple of home runs, and there was a scout there, and he said, "Hey, actually, there's one spot left. You want to come and play for this little D3 school at the middle of Georgia?" I said, "I'll take anything at this point, right? I wasn't even supposed to be here, but here I am."
That's great, man. So you did D3. I know it wasn't the dream of the D1, but I think that was the first potential spark of overcoming a really, really tough obstacle where like you're not sure how your future is going to pan out, and you just threw away the walker and like, I'm going to walk again. I'm going to really get back into it. So you obviously played D3 for a little bit, and then from my understanding is that you stayed with the baseball industry, right? I mean, was that fresh out of college? You kind of stuck with it?
Yeah, I mean, what I did was I did a couple of years at the D3 school, and I transferred to UGA. UGA was kind of like my dream school. I knew nothing about money, so what I did was when I transferred to UGA, I changed my major to personal finance. So I went this personal finance route. Had a great time at UGA, met my wife. I got into like the startup world when I was at UGA.
Well, out of curiosity, what made you get drawn to personal finance out of all the other subjects you could have selected?
I never learned it in high school. No one ever taught it to me. Like I watched my parents blow through money and then sit in the bedroom and balance checkbooks once a month. And so the only way that I knew how to figure it out was to just dive all into it and learn about it. Right. So scholastically, that's what I did. I dove into the books and I really tried to understand, what is personal finance. And I think the biggest thing I took away from it was you can really take advantage of money, right? And there's a huge stigma, like money is the root of all evil, and insert whatever other stigma you want to put around it. But what I really learned was how to be a steward of money, and how to be a student of money, and how I can properly and respect money the way that it should be, right? That's all I went to school to learn. No one ever taught that to me, so I'm going to go learn it. And that's what I did at UGA before. I had a buddy who was working with the Savannah Bananas, and at the time, I knew about Savannah, been there so much. It's a quick little getaway for me and the family when I was younger, and he was working for them, and it was just kind of this wacky thing that was attractive to me because I love baseball. It was new, so it was exciting, and they were doing things that no one had really seen before.
Just to kind of echo, I think our generation of millennials was never taught about anything finance related, not about taxes, not about how to properly run a business at all. Sure as hell learned about Pythagorean theorem and like sine and cosine, right? Stuff I never used the second I passed that test by the skin of my teeth. But I think that it's such an importance for the younger generation to really get involved early in finances on business and personal end, because it could really set you up for life. I think we can both agree on that. So moving forward to Savannah Bananas, now, are you involved in finances there? Like, is that your thing as far as like continuing, like managing the books of the team?
My foot in the door was with the ticket department. I think most sports teams, they have an open door through the ticket department, and then from there it can go one of a million ways, right? But so I got lucky. I did my internship in the ticket department. They brought me on full time the next season, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to graduate. I should probably put my big boy pants on and get a big boy job, right? So they offered me a full-time job. I did one more season, or maybe half a season actually, until the director that was currently there was transitioning out. And so I said, you know what? I graduated with personal finance. There's a corporate finance role open. They're not super different from each other. Just one for, affect one person versus, a lot more people. So I said, whatever I can do, let me transition into this role. So that's when I slowly started transitioning into coordinator. And that what I didn't know was that entailed everything from bookkeeping to controller work to assisting the president with what I consider like fractional CFO service.
That's amazing, man. So this is like the spark of like the fractional CFO, where you're not just like bookkeeping on a monthly and wrecking, kind of doing more of the mundane tasks, more visionary, but like, hey, where do we want to take this now? And what a great playing field, for lack of a better word, pun intended there, where you can actually work with a large company of like generating ticket revenues, how to balance books, how to project. So this is kind of where I assume where you earned your stripes and was like really, really learning the process on the fly, it seems, of like how to run, I would assume, multi-million-dollar company at that point, right?
Yeah, it's super spoiled. The company was doing really, really well. I mean, I'm sure you can see them all over. They're on ES. They have a whole documentary on ESPN Plus now, and so and they're traveling across 30 plus cities this year in the world tour, and they're gonna probably do more next year. So I got really, really spread out in the beginning because they were still very young and they were experiencing so many growth pains. So what I really got to help with is we had to set up so many processes, and it made me realize the importance of having process. Um, there were, we were growing just out of our shoes, basically. So quite literally, there was just multiple desks in these little storage sheds that we were just putting together, and it was like this cool like bootstrap mentality, and everyone had this let's go build it first before we buy it mentality. So I got super spoiled, and I got to experience a company with growing pains, how to go and how to navigate this growing pains, and we even went through COVID together. So I think that's something that no one had in their playbook. And a lot of times when we were going through these growing pains, we could look at a different company or a different sports team, and we can see, okay, maybe they did these things that helped them through these growing pains. But with COVID, it was just, putting your head together and figuring out what's going to be best for the people. And I think that's where I also learned the value of having core values in your business. And so I get super spoiled and learn all of that. On top of, I got to work with inventory, and we got to work with payables. Ticket revenue came in beforehand. We got to work on construction projects. So I got experience in how the flow of money and the timing of money is super, super important.
No, that's great, man. But was there a certain, you made it through COVID with them, was there a certain aha moment of like, hey, I think I can kind of apply this in my own business? Was it like a parting amicably from them, or did you have this festering in your mind for the past 5 years of like, I want to be an entrepreneur? Just curious to see the kind of inner workings of your thoughts at the time.
Yeah, I kind of left out the part of the story where I'm a huge believer in I want to put my efforts into something and get rewarded from those efforts.
Sure.
And so all the time while I was doing this, I had met my wife, and so we were saving up for a ring, and I wanted to buy this house, and I wanted to live what I thought was like the American dream, with the formula of getting a degree, getting a good job, and you would get those things, right? Well, the real world slapped me in the face, and I realized like that's not the case at all. So what I did was, in college, we learned a little bit, and through the Society of Entrepreneurs that I was with in college, learned a lot about business plans. So on the side, while I was at this 9-to-5 job, in the mornings and at night, I'd go home and I would help people on freelance websites write business plans. People would hire me, and we would write business plans, and we would create projections that I learned when I was working my 9-to-5 job. So I took the projections and started applying it to like this little side hustle. And we were doing some Gary Vee things, like finding things at yard sales and flipping them on eBay. So
why not, man? I think that's brilliant too. If anyone who feels like they're stuck in a 9-to-5, I can guarantee you, whatever you're doing at your 9-to-5 is a skill set that you can be applied in your own business somehow. It's a matter of extrapolating that data so you can apply it to whatever it is. You could be selling bananas, and then figure out like, oh, I know the good supplier now. So if I want to start my own thing, I have the connection from here and build on the relationship. That's very savvy that you had that kind of inclination to start the side hustle. And you made it through COVID at this point. So this is 2020 when this was kind of...
Yeah, this is 2020 and creeping into 2021, right? Because, I mean, we were a sports team, so having fans come to the ballpark was a huge part of the business model, right? And so there were still multiple challenges going through that. And I mean, and that's really when you learn that there's more things than just the numbers, right? There's taking care of people. There's just being there for your customers. That I realized the more that you take care of people, the longer they want to do business with you, right? And that's the name of the game, right? Is you want to make business fun. Like, you can't just look at numbers every month and just make off the fly decisions. You'll just run yourself and you burn yourself out, right? Like, you just got to have fun. And so I think the huge thing I learned through COVID was not a lot of people was having fun. No one was really expecting anything like this to happen. So everyone was super caught off guard, but we turned it into having fun. We created new revenue streams. We had guys playing Road to the Show, recreating the baseball team and playing other baseball teams online. And so like it just all went back to like having fun. And I think people need to remind themselves a lot of times when they're going through business and there's a hurdle and an obstacle, like just remember you got in this to have fun, right? And you got to have fun.
Absolutely, man. Now, so you started this side hustle. Was the intention of I want to grow this to replace my 9 to 5 income, and then this is my full-time thing? Or was it more of like, hey, I see this opportunity. I'm going to burn the ships, burn the boats right now, and I'm going to leap into this. And I'm sure there had to be some conversations with your wife about this, of like leaving a salary position with benefits to something that's a complete what if, right? So how did that work out? Because it seems like they weren't really, not to knock Savannah Bananas, but maybe they weren't recognizing your potential and what that you should be paid, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a limitation on the size, right? So there was a few things that I could do. I could stick around for 5 more years and then go through this 5-year waiting period until the company took the next step and leveled up and really expanded. Or I can, really focus on this thing that I'm doing on the side, which actually had a need. And I really leaned into it because there's a big need, and companies need funding, right? Especially startups. And a great source to get it is through the SBA. So with the SBA process, you have to have a formal written business plan and you have to have a forecast. And so that's really what I found a huge need in people needing this and companies
and
needing
for those
it.
who don't know, can you just describe what an SBA loan is?
Yeah, SBA is a small business administration loan. I think the most popular one is probably the SBA 7A loan, where they'll lend you money based on, as any other loan, they'll lend you money on your business so that you can fuel the working capital that you need to start, right? Now, I won't say it's just limited to new businesses. There's also ways that businesses acquire other businesses through the SBA process. But at the time for what I was doing, I was really targeting startups who needed that capital to, fund their CapEx project or really just speed up their timeline into getting into the economy to scale.
Yeah, what's really cool that I've learned about SBA loans, they could also use it to acquire real estate, as long as I believe 51% is geared towards your actual business. But the other 49% could just be a rental side of it. And the loan rates and usually are much more, are better than, say, getting other creative financing offers. That's pretty cool.
They're super favorable. These are government-backed loans. So they're super favorable, and these are administered by banks. So these banks are incentivized to give you these loans. And I think the coolest thing is a lot of people don't realize there are advisors out there that will help you get into these SBA loans. They're only incentivized to give them out. And I just think they're really overlooked, to be honest with you.
I think so, man. Yeah, it's definitely a great service tool that people should really tap into if you're thinking of doing a startup, acquiring real estate that's going to expand your business. It's an excellent tool. I've used it personally myself too. It kind of helped me fuel my success. So kind of getting back to your personal story here. So you have this side hustle, creating these business plans for these startups, doing some projections. What was the catalyst that made you leave Savannah Bananas?
The funny thing is that while I was building all of these business plans, projections, I mean, not only is it, pitched to the SBA, but it's also pitched to investors. I never realized one would actually get funded. And we had a company and startup get funded $1 million. And that whole round, I think we collected 1.6 for their initial seed round. And that was kind of the initial moment of when they came to me and they were like, hey, we know the product side of things. We have no idea how to tell our investors how we're doing. Can you come and help us? And so immediately I was like, okay, they're asking me to do this. So I'm going to take all the knowledge that I know and apply it to this brand new startup where I had a lot of value and experience in, right?
That's great. So if I ever want to launch, you got to help me out with it to get raise some funds here. So this is essentially it's your first client. Your first hey, this is more than just doing projections now. I need to really put this thing together.
Yeah, I got really serious at that point. It really made me realize, oh, there's actually a job or a business rather that I could create around doing this for people that have already been funded. So I kind of look back at this side hustle and I really say, okay, I'm having a ton of fun creating all these relationships with people that are just like me. They're young entrepreneurs, they're go-getters, and they're super smart people. And I want to continue surrounding myself around those people while I was debating, okay, I can wait 3 or 4 more years with the bananas and then get the promotion that I want, or I can create the promotion that I want, right? And I think a lot of people in today's society, they're so caught up in everyone deserving a raise. And I think what people forget is they can create the raise for themselves. And that's essentially what I did. I wanted to be a CFO. So I said, hey, I'll be the CFO of your company. Now, you mentioned having the conversation with my wife. I thought it was going to be easy because she's a business owner herself. She owns a photography business. And whenever I told her, it was kind of like, deer the headlights, because now it's unpredictable revenue from both sides of the marriage, right?
I hear you, man. But obviously she acquiesced it because here we are, right? So
Exactly.
you ended up kind of setting sail on your own here and start up your fractional CFO services. So in a nutshell, what would you say fractional CFO is, and who is it good for?
It's businesses have this, what I consider intermediary period of, hey, maybe you can afford a bookkeeper, but you can't really afford this $250,000 salary CFO that comes with all this experience, right? And you see that all the time with these big companies. They're always headhunting all these like experienced executives, and they just cost a lot of money. But you got to get there first, right? You can't just grow overnight. We all know this. And so there was this small gap in companies that needed this type of expertise and guidance. And that's why I really felt like, okay, this fractional part-time CFO makes the most sense, because this is something that we can do on a part-time basis and give them expertise from a full-time CFO, right? A lot of businesses try to fill this in with CPA firms, and I'm fighting this right now, but CPA firms are really good at doing your taxes, and then they'll see you next year, put you out the door, and you'll see them the next time you need your taxes.
I'm going through
right?
it myself. The CPA is almost, they take like their summer vacation seriously.
Yeah,
There's no strategy planning, put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. And so I saw a need in this more like hands-on approach and helping companies from a financial standpoint stay tidy and put them in positions where they can see transparency in their cash flow, or they just need to build a budget, right? There's a number of businesses that don't even have a budget built, right? And maybe these companies are so good at the product and they're so busy that they don't have time for it, right? And so we do a lot of things. We feel the need to save a ton of time, and we save a ton of money too, because you're not paying for this full-time salaried CFO. So insert fractional CFO.
There you go. So what would be your ideal client avatar? Like who makes the most sense to work with you?
This is where I try to pick a lot of people off. My favorite clients to work with are service-based clients, right?
That's my clientele.
I think to throw shade on some businesses, I personally, this is personal, I do not like working with inventory-based companies. They're very, very low margin, whereas service-based businesses have such a higher margin. And I just feel like with those higher margin companies, you just have so much more potential to grow faster and to really create value for yourself, because cash flow is the name of the game, right? And so I love working with service-based businesses. I've got clients in the healthcare industry. We've got construction clients. We've got agencies. I've got a couple of agencies actually. And then we also have an interior design agency as well. So agencies have been my bread and butter so far.
What is the typical revenue that you're seeing when they kind of come knocking like, hey, I need a little bit of help here. I've outgrown my part-time bookkeeper, so to speak.
There's 2 levels to it. I think the first one is revenue. Revenue is a dictator of complexity, but it's not a dictator of profitability, right? So there's 2 ends of the spectrum. I've got clients that when they hit, I would say normally around $1 million, once they hit $1 million, they're either super profitable or they're super not profitable. There's never a company in between, right? And that's when they need the most help. They need to figure out what's going on in the bottom line. Why can't they create any cash? They have so much cash, they don't know what to do with it next, right? So it's like they need help with that game plan and strategy to align with the goals they've set. So we do have clients that we offer like back office support for. So we do bookkeeping, we do controller work. Those companies are typically doing 100 to 500K, but it's really that 500 to million plus that really need a more future-oriented a strategy and really a partner, which is what we really are for a lot of companies, and partnering with them into helping them along with whatever they're going.
And I could say from experience, once you hit that $1 million mark, you're not a one-man operation anymore. You have a team of people around you kind of making things happen. Typically, you're stuck in operations, maybe you're doing sales, and the bookkeeping really does kind of go to the back burner where you just get a P&L every month. I'm like, looks good to me. That's really it. So if you're a service-based business owner, you're a roofer, a plumber, you have handyman service, whatever it happens to be, a DJ company, what do you see as the number one problem they're coming to you with? Like, what's the phone call? You're on a discovery call with them. What's like the number one topic that comes up? And how can someone better prepare for this if they're just listening to this episode?
Yeah, the thing they always come to me with is cash problems. And that's why cash is the most important thing to manage in a business. The root of the problem usually comes from cash timing, right? So a DJ service and a construction service, they may be service-based businesses, but they're totally different in the timing in which their cash cycle closes, right? A construction company may have to front materials, labor, permits, inserts, anything else that has to be purchased in order to complete that job. And once the job's complete, then they can send an invoice. Whereas like a DJ may book something well in advance, and they may ask for a deposit, or they may actually ask for 100% of the money up front before the event. And so I think the lack of understanding of the cash cycle is usually the root of everyone's problem.
And are you seeing a lot of these clientele that are kind of doing the old school mythology of money in and the money out's my profit, and that's what I take home? Is that what you're seeing, or is it a little more intricacies that you have to kind of fix?
What I usually see is people think that whatever's on the P&L translates to whatever's in the bank account, right? And that is it is not the case. No. Especially if you have the P&L that looks right, or it could be a bookkeeping problem if it's not what they don't align one to one, right? I think most business owners need to understand how do all three statements, the profit and loss statement, cash flow statement, and the balance sheet, how do they all work together, and how does that translate to their bank account? So that's the biggest misconception that I'm really helping people understand, is how does that translate into the bank account? Because we're business owners, we're good at pulling up our bank account, and we see, hey, money in, money out. There's more money in than out, so I feel good. And then maybe they get to the end of the year and they talk to their CPA and they say, hey, look, you owe this huge tax bill, and now it's just right out the window. Everything you worked for is gone. When you could be working for strategies throughout the year that's going to help, limit a tax liability, or prepare way more in advance, because a lot of people just check the bank account and they think that that's it.
Yeah, and I've in my coaching business, I've seen business owners where the way they take a draw is whatever profit the P&L says, like, that's our draw, and that's their salary, which is crazy. So if you were a new business owner, or maybe you're bringing in $500,000 to $1 million, how would you personally structure your business finances so you're geared to success and scalability? Like, what is the secret sauce, so to speak?
Yeah. When business owners take all the net income out of the business, you're just taking every bit of free cash flow plus out of the business, right? Whenever I talk to business owners, they always want to know, hey, what am I paying myself? Am I allowed to pay myself? If I am allowed, how much can I pay myself? This is a huge question that always comes up in like the initial conversations that we do. And there's no easy blanketed answer, but I will say it does determine if you have profitability or not. If you're not 100K profitable or more, you shouldn't switch to an S corp. meaning you shouldn't pay yourself a salary. You should pay yourself a draw. Now, if you're not quite 100K per year profitable, then I specialize in something called profit first, where you're taking a percentage of revenue and you're not just pulling it off from net income.
So expand a little bit on that profit first, because I think what's the gentleman who wrote the book?
Mike McCowell.
Thank you. Yeah, he kind of popularized this methodology here. And this is something that I recently switched to, or I need to switch to, is kind of going this S corp as opposed to doing an owner's role, because I think as you scale, I would love to hear your opinion on this. It probably makes more sense when you're bringing in, say, $250,000 profit. Think, I'm going to take a $125,000 salary and maybe pay myself quarterly bonuses, let's just say, based on the business. Is that typically what you would recommend or structure on, let's call it, handyman service business?
Yeah, 100%. If so let me give some more context on what the profit first method is. So Mike McCowell wrote this book called The Profit First Method, and if you read the book, there's a couple of mentions from the Savannah Bananas, and I was the one that got to implement this profit.
Oh, get out of here, man! I didn't know that.
Yeah, so when they talk about the Savannah Bananas in the book, I was the one that was able to implement this, right? And so now what I do in my new business is, when we work with business for the first time, it's really important to set this up, because what this really does is it takes that envelope, the old school envelope, you take your paycheck and you put 20 towards groceries and 30 towards bills. It's really modernizing that for a business. So I like to look at it as a modernized banking system, and that complements your accounting system. So it doesn't replace it, but I think it does work simultaneously. So really what the profit first method says is you take X amount of percent of taxes, profit, and operations and owner pay out of your revenue every quarter, and you transfer them into those other buckets. And so
now,
when you have...
I was going to say, if you can get tactical, when you say X amount of percentage, let's assume a business is bringing in $100,000 in profit. Let's keep the numbers super simple. And you're in a standard federal tax bracket versus state bracket. What percentage would you allocate towards profit, to taxes, things of that nature?
Yeah, for profit specifically, start with 1%. If you don't want to handicap yourself and take all the money that you made in your revenue and just dump it straight into your profit account, right? And you don't want to handicap yourself. So I always say start with 1% for profit. It's a rule of thumb. If you can do more, great. I would go up to as much as like 5%.
Now, when you say 1% of profit, you mean like on an annual basis, or like if someone brought in, $10,000 that month, 1% would be 1,000 or 100? No.
Let me make sure I clarify. It's 1% of revenue and not profit.
That makes more sense.
So what I like to do is also have like a revenue bucket. So let's just say you're getting paid through Stripe, or if it's a handyman service, maybe they're using Jobber or Builder Trend.
Pro, right?
And those are getting transferred into a bank account. I like that to go into a revenue bank account, right? And so just by looking at that account should get emptied, because all of your other accounts should equal 100%. So your revenue account gets drawn to zero. So maybe 5% of that revenue every quarter, I would say, is a great time to transfer. Let me back up. If you're starting this, do it monthly. I would do it bi-monthly, the 10th and the 25th. The 10th and the 25th, so that you have time to transfer and for bills to come out the 15th and the 1st, and typically payroll. We can get deep into it, but the sub accounts that you create are really up to you, right? You can break apart the OpEx account into payroll, which a lot of our businesses do, so that they know, okay, X% of this revenue going straight to payroll. And that could depend on the business, right? Taxes is a really, really tricky one. And I know I hate saying this, but there's no one size fits all. If you're an LLC, I would look at your previous year's tax return on your business, see what percentage you had to pay of taxes compared to your revenue. Let that be your starting guide, right? And let that percentage kind of dictate what goes into that. So could be 28%, as high as 28%, but could be as low as like 10%, depending on if you're an LLC partnership, or if you're an S Corp, or if you're a C Corp. If you're a C Corp, then you just set it at the flat 21% tax rate, and that's your percentage, right? So there's no one size fits all. Always, consult obviously with an accountant before you set this up. But what you're really doing is the important buckets are profitability and owner's pay, right? So let's just go back to your example. Let's say you're making $250K and you set a $100,000 salary. We have to remember that salary has taxes drawn away from it. So that's going to help, lower the percentage in our tax bucket. But at the same time, maybe you want to reward yourself on a quarterly basis based on, what's in your profit bucket or what's in your owner's pay bucket, right? So if it's in your profit bucket, maybe you take half of it and you go and you buy yourself a dinner. I think it's super important to pay ourselves dividends and draws so that we realize the fruits of our labor. If we don't pay ourselves, we don't remind ourselves, like, why are we doing this? So it's perfectly okay. And my personal finance brain is like screaming against me, but it's perfectly okay to go and spend a nice dinner and go buy a nice steak and glass of wine with the wife. But let me get back to the owner pay section really quick, because I think there's a lot more that goes into it. The owner pay bucket, you set, I would say, 30% to start, especially if you're a service-based business. Start with 30%, right, on top of your salary. And now every month you look at that and you say, okay, is this needed anywhere else in the business?
Marketing, payroll, advertising, whatever it may be, right?
Any other operating expenses. If your company is short, don't be greedy and take that pay. If you already have a salary. Now, if you don't have a salary, take that 30% through the marketing, through OpEx, everything, and put it into your bank account. It's super important to pay yourself. You have to feel those dopamine rushes of, hey, I worked so hard on this. Now I'm going to get rewarded for it, right? So there's definitely some nuances depending on how the business is structured.
And if I remember it, and this is where I initially had pushback on profit first, is that it does require separate bank accounts for mental purposes, not necessarily for like functionality. Because technically speaking, you can go into your QuickBooks and set up these sub accounts and just like this money here, it's all lump sum in one bank account, but you could have it segmented in QuickBooks. But if I remember, his lesson was, no, you should have a separate bank account for your taxes, which I do now. You should have a separate account for your marketing, separate account for your profit. Is that something you would espouse and recommend as well?
Yeah, especially if you're a heavy cash business. Let's remember, only $250,000 is insured to begin with. And if you have more of that into a bank account, hey, look, this is a great time to implement this and put money elsewhere. So, yes, putting it into, regardless if you have $250K or $1, right? Separate especially the profit and the tax. This is where I really like to, a lot of business owners start with a national account, bank account. Find a local account. Put your tax and your profit accounts in that local bank. And honestly, write yourself a check. Go in there, talk with the people in the local bank, deposit your check, and that's your transfer, right? And that way, psychologically, it's hard for you to go and take money out of your taxes and put it back into your business. It defeats the whole purpose. Also, simultaneously, you're making relationships with your local bank, and should you come up with this huge investment that you need to make into your company to increase efficiency or have some sort of ROI tied to it, and if you need to borrow money, hey, now you've really created a relationship with that local bank, and you can bring them your P&L and say, hey, look, also, we have these other accounts. This is our financial picture. Can you help us?
Right. And that's excellent advice. I really like the actual act of walking into a bank, cutting yourself a check. A little bit old school now with the younger generation, but I think the paying yourself is going to go a long way. Because right now what I do is go to the bank account. I'm like, I made this much money. I'm going to transfer this into my personal account. And it's done within an instant with no human interaction. Convenient as hell, but I think you lack the presence that you're kind of espousing, where you're basically going in and building up these relationships. No, this is great, Matt. Now, I want to go into a little bit of some misconceptions that I think people have when it comes to business write-offs. People think like, just write off everything. Let's get involved in here a little bit. Can you really write off anything on your business? And what are the regulations and the restrictions I should leave with?
Yeah, this is where I blame TikTok and any other
short there. Yeah.
Yeah, just any sort of short form video where you see people on the vacations and they're at steak dinners. Like there's definitely lines that are drawn. The best way I can put it is if there's any sort of personal benefit to it all, then you're in the gray area, right? And if it is 100% personal benefit, it is not a write-off. So meals is the easiest one that people abuse. What they don't realize is if you get audited, they're going to ask you to speak to who were you at supper or lunch with, why did you spend that much, and what was the purpose, and what was talked about during that lunch, right? So what I personally do is whenever I'm out, I will make notes on conversations that we had, just a one-liner of,
Right.
hey,
And
we talked about marketing. Yeah. For our mastermind, it was networking every single time, right? But okay, the Austin trip's a great example. I had business intentions to go and learn, right? Educational, perfect. The
definitely
best
write-off.
write-off. Invest in yourself, right? But while we're there, hey, I get to see Austin, Texas. We get to eat good food. We get to, fly out to a new city. Like all of those are write-offs. Now, if stepmom is or mom is in the next state over, and you see the flight is $100, and you put that on your business to go and see mom, and you have a couple of dinners together, like that's going to be super hard to defend, right? So two things: if it's 100% personal, then you can't write it off. But if it has your business tied to it, then create a paper trail. That's the other part. If you create a paper trail, you're covering yourself.
Even marking
100%.
receipts, like you get a receipt at dinner and say, well, hey, spoke with Josh. This is what we discussed. It doesn't have to be some elaborate, eulogy that's on the back of the receipt. Just it's more of just a verification in case you do get audited. You do have that proof.
It's all that paper trail. Name and a one-liner. Talk taxes. Like that's it. That's all you need.
You're saying I can't go to Maui and put on the business and then look at one property and then scuba dive the rest of the time I'm there, and that's not a business write-off? That's unfortunate.
Now, if you had a rental property and you stay there less than 4 consecutive days, and you had to go and fix a couple of windows, and hey, maybe that afternoon you went and snorkeled.
That's the gray area, right?
Exactly. Now it's not in let's create a paper trail, let's have some fun with it. But if you were just flying to Maui, doing some snorkeling, coming back, no rental property over there, pretty tough to defend.
Now, I've probably got this advice from Instagram Reels, and I want you to squash the dreams on this. Is it true or untrue that you can use your children as potential tax write-offs? And I know that the deal is they're shredding paper, so they're they're helping the business. What's the advice here on that?
Yeah, you can actually pay your kids. However, your kids have to be actually working, right? So let's just say you have a 6-year-old and you tell them to go and do something, but they do what any other 6-year-old does. They find a tablet and they sit on a tablet and they goof off the whole time, right? Like that's pretty inadmissible. However, if you have someone that is purely dedicated, a kid to purely dedicated to cleaning up, shredding paper, maybe they're going out and leaving letters on people's doorsteps. Those are things that you can pay your kids and deduct, right? Because now you're creating labor. I would be careful about how you pay them, because you could,
right. My child, the salary of $100,000 to shred paper probably won't fly.
They're going to look at market comparisons and probably rule that out.
For sure.
Yeah, that's another thing you have to consider is how much are you paying them? Go to Glassdoor, Indeed, see what the average salary is for a specific job, and pay them hourly, because we all know they're not going to be full-time employees.
So the other question I would have, what about when it comes to your home office? Let's say both of us are homeowners. Can you technically charge yourself rent to the business if you're living in your own space?
There's a big question mark and emphasis around the Augusta rule, where you can rent your home out for 14 days and it'd be tax-free. The IRS just came back and has made it abundantly clear that your business cannot be the one renting to yourself. You cannot rent from your business cannot rent from yourself. They're throwing that out left and right. So you cannot pay yourself your rent if you have a home office, because you're double dipping. if you have a home office like we do, then I can write off the square footage of
Yep.
my mortgage, uh, my internet bill, my utilities, electricity, everything that's involved in, what percentage of square feet this is compared to my whole home. But I can't also pay myself a rent and realize that expense as well, because now I'm double dipping, and that's what they don't want you to do. They don't want you to double dip, right?
Right. It's very clear that, like, okay, your LLC's paying you rent, your personal name, so it's
Yeah,
probably right.
whatever.
At least an audit, probably. So
Paper trails are hard to hide on that one.
now, when it comes to as a real estate investor myself, I classify as a real estate professional. I know most people don't, unfortunately, due to the time constraints here. But if, let's say, you're paying yourself in a dividend way, right? Is that considered capital gains, or is that considered earned income?
Yeah, I think it really depends on, are you materially participating in the business, or is it passive activity? If it's passive activity, now we're talking about are a lot of the deductions that you can write off from when you're materially participating, it's cut to like a quarter, if at all, if you're doing it as a passive activity. So I think that's where the biggest differentiator is. Are you actively participating, or is this something that's passive and you're not giving as much attention to it? So there's been a couple of cases where, and let me define what materially participating is. There was a case where these guys set up this LLC for real estate, and they went to a lot of places looking for housing. Those places just so happens to be at the same time,
Hawaii, Lake Tahoe,
at the same time as the Kentucky Derby and the Super Bowl and like all of these major events. And what happened was they never bought a property. They were realizing all these expenses, and they never recognized the revenue. If you don't have any revenue, this is a hobby. If they rule this as a hobby, then you're going to have so many expenses ruled out. And I think that really defines, in real estate, are you materially participating, or are you running a legit operation, or are you doing this to try to hide something else? What are your intentions?
Yeah, like for my personal investment properties, I even have my own property managers handle. It's truly passive. So now that can qualify as as capital gains tax, essentially. So you don't have to pay the FICA and all that other fun stuff that comes associated with it. And I know people will play around with this, and there's always gray areas of the what ifs. But I think if someone who's listening to this, you take the straight and narrow path here. If you there's plenty of legal ways to lower your taxable income where you don't have to necessarily go through all these hoops to make things happen. What would you say is the number one tax loophole that you see that a service-based business can potentially take to lower their income bracket?
I think the easiest one is going back to what I was talking about earlier, converting yourself from an LLC to an S corp. So if you do have a position where you're making 60 to 100K in extra net profit, let's be honest, that's our tax liability at the end of the year, is your net profit, right? If you're an LLC, that owner pay does not belong on the P&L. It does not deduct your tax liability. If you're an S corp and you can afford it from a cash perspective, now you can put that on your P&L, and that lowers your tax liability. That's number one. The second one is just the power of depreciation, especially in real estate, right? In real estate, you get 27 and a half years to take the full amount of that property and depreciate it every single year for 27 and a half years. Now, we know you're not actually losing cash, but you're lowering that tax liability. That goes on your profit and loss. So I think those are the two biggest tax write-offs that people can't typically overlook.
I would say so. Even more mortgage interest on your investment properties. You could do something called cost segregation, which that's a whole other episode into itself. We don't want to go down a deep rabbit hole here, right?
We're doing one of those right now with one of my clients.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you got to get a structural engineer involved. It's but it can be, if you have a huge capital gain bill coming due, I mean, that would really tank that down to almost nothing. So it makes sense strategically, and that's why it's so important to have someone like you in your corner who's like, hey, like this is what you're seeing, like a 360 view here. Like, let's strategically plan this out, as opposed to me doing my own research or just kind of going buck wild and not really understanding what the repercussions of these movements will make. So with that being said, Matt, I really appreciate this kind of candid conversation. I think a lot of business owners are going to find some great value on what we just kind of discussed here. as far as Powell Financial Group is concerned, what services are you offering? Is it a full, comprehensive kind of white glove, like, hey, we'll kind of take this over and we'll meet biweekly, whatever the program is? Or do you also offer it where it's like, hey, when you need us once a quarter, we're here to help? Like, how does it typically work for your services?
We're super hands-on. So we like to meet at least once a month, right? We want to understand what financial position that you're in, because we meet once a quarter. Like that's definitely a start, but we can't move fast enough to pivot if we need to, right? Decisions that we help our clients make, those decisions affect the next quarter, the next 2 quarters, 3, the next 4 quarters, right? And so the faster that we can make decisions, informed decisions, then the better. So what we typically do is for any client that we serve, we took over all of their back office financial operations, bookkeeping, accounting, creating budgets, and talking about various reports. Now, our white glove, full suite service is now the full comprehensive, hey, we're creating a financial department for you, and you're going to have an assigned CFO. This fractional CFO is going to give you that 360-degree view and give you advice on, and it's not just business, because a lot of this business goes into personal, but it's like it affects your personal life. It affects all aspects of your business. And we basically want to make the financial process as transparent and easy as possible, right? We have 3 core values in a business, which is commitment, transparency, and integrity. We're always going to commit to our clients 100%. If we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it. We're transparent. We want you to see full visibility. We'll educate you as much as you want to know, or we'll just make it as easily digestible as possible, so that you can understand where your business is right now. What is the financial pulse right now? And then integrity. Like we're going to play some gray areas and find some legal loopholes, but we're never going to. I can't afford to do that and to give up everything that we've built on behalf of one client. So if there's something that you want to do that's out of bounds, we're not going to help with that. But we're not the firm for you, but we're definitely going to take care of you and hopefully ease a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and as a business owner, I think sometimes people can think of it in short term, right? Where it's like, this is going to cost me thousands of dollars. I'm going to lose out on this. I won't be able to do this. My comeback to that is that you can't afford not to, because if you really want to grow and scale your business, you're going to be stymied on the fact that you don't even understand what your cash flow is, or about can you afford this new hire even. Like simple things like this are going to prevent your growth. And if you're the business owner who's doing the finances and that's not your forte, you don't have a CPA background, you don't have an accounting or bookkeeping background, and you don't have the time to get that skill set, you're doing yourself and your company a disservice by continuing to do it yourself to save money on the short end. So I think this I would say looking into a fractional CFO is an investment into yourself and your business future. I would highly recommend Mr. Powell's services here, because he's the man with the plan, so to speak. And he'll hopefully we convince you this episode that this is something they should look into if you're in that criteria. Now, if you're just starting out, maybe not so. Maybe you can just take some of the principles we discussed, read Profit First, and implement it, day one. And when you get to a certain point, then you can maybe come knock and start looking for a fractional CFO. So on that note, I'm gonna end this interview, which has been fantastic, with a question I ask every single entrepreneur that I have on this show. Let's rewind the clock. You're 21 years old again. You're fresh out of college, let's say. What would the young Matt Powell do differently now, knowing the knowledge that you have today?
I think the biggest thing for me would be putting my pride to the side. I tried to figure a lot of things out on my own, and I would tell him, hey, it's okay to go and ask for advice. It's okay to find a mentor at that age, as long as you're providing some value on your end there, right? So put the ego aside and know that it's okay to go and seek help from other people that are more successful than you.
Absolutely. That's really great advice. And I suffered from that myself only until recently, where I had this fallacy that I was the smartest guy in the room, and clearly I'm not. And that's what led me to M3, us getting to know each other, is that I wanted to be in better and better rooms. I think Drayton said, you're some of the 5 people that you hang around with, and to constantly question yourself, like, who am I hanging around with? Who am I interacting with on a weekend basis? Who are my friends? Who are my relationships with? So that for sure is something that I think everyone can kind of take to heart. So Matt, if someone is interested in your CFO services, they want to find out more about you, where can they find out?
I think the easiest place is to send me an email. You can send me an email, or what I prefer, which is sending me a DM on, I guess I can't say Twitter anymore. I got to say X now,
X.
right?
I know it's weird.
You can follow me at Matt Powell CFO on X. I love getting DMs. I'm an open book. I get it. If you're not super ready to afford a fractional CFO, but maybe you have some questions about profit first. Maybe you read it and you say, for my business, does this still make sense? I love helping people. So, send me a DM there, and I'm usually pretty active on there.
Awesome, man. I hope anyone listening will send you that DM, reach out, and get the conversation started. Once again, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for your dedication to service businesses. I'm sure you and I are going to work together very soon as I launch the coaching side of the business. So thanks again, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'll definitely be following along.